Krishna, Hare Hare. We started kirtan, and the phone decided it didn't like the kirtan, so it ended the kirtan. And here we are. We're back again. We're going to try to give a class and see what if Facebook allows us to do that. If they didn't, Facebook didn't like the kirtan. Maybe they thought it was copyrighted by Sony or something. Who knows? The sound is distorted. Okay. Hare Krishna. What about now? It's because when I use the phone has a built-in, it's a compressor. It brings the sound up. And so right now, if I were on my computer, you wouldn't even be able to hear me. So I believe this is how we used to do it back in the day. Is that better now? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Still distorting? Or it's okay? While you're trying, I guess, make an ugly face if it's still distorted. Okay. Still distorted. What about now? Now can you hear me? I'm using a different mic right now because I want to have this big thing in front of me. I'm going to keep talking, and you can tell me if it's still distorting. Hare Krishna, still the same. Hare Krishna. How about now? Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. It's good now. Now it is good. Okay. We're going to try my old tried and true trick, which is the bookmark. Ta-da! We're going to go to where we left off, supposedly where we left off. Now sound is better. Yeah, okay. So this is interesting because when I go on the phone, we get a different experience than we go on the computer. And I have to note in my brain the settings for the phone until I can figure out how to get back onto Facebook on my computer. Theory of illusion, yeah, we're right there. So we are discussing the conversation Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And we were talking about Mayavad philosophy. And as we explained last week, that by hearing Mayavad philosophy, even someone on the stage of Bhava could fall down. It's so contaminating. And now we're reading it, but we're hearing it explained by Srila Prabhupada. So don't worry, we're not going to fall down. We're going to fall up. We're going to fall forward at Krishna's feet, obeisances. At least if you fall down on Krishna's feet. Then you'll be okay. Okay. The theory of illusion of the Mayavadi school is advocated on the ground that the theory of emanation will cause a transformation of the absolute truth. If you don't understand this, don't go away, I will explain it. If that is the case, Vyasadeva is wrong. To avoid this, they have skillfully brought in the theory of illusion. But the world or the cosmic creation is not false. It's maintained by the Mayavadi school. It simply has no permanent existence. A non-permanent thing cannot be called false altogether. But the conception that the material body is the self is certainly wrong. So there's a saying, Brahma Satya, spirit is truth, Jagan Mitya. Mitya means false, Jagat means this world. This is a Mayavadi saying. Brahma Satya Jagan Mitya. Spirit is truth, this world is false. We don't say this world is false. We say it's temporary. It's not false. It exists. We have a body. It definitely exists. We can say, yeah, the illusion that I'm this body, That's an illusion. But it's not that the body doesn't exist. It's not that the world doesn't exist. It's not that the world is false. It's temporary. It's asat. Asat means unreal in the sense of temporary. But it's not false. It does exist. So, yes, Brahma is truth. And this world is temporary. Asat. But not mithya, not false. So another thing the Mayavadis say is that, but actually they say so many stupid things. Let's not worry so much. But Prabhupada says here, the world is not false, as maintained by the Mayavadi school. It simply has no permanent existence. A non-permanent thing cannot be called false altogether, but the conception that the material body is the self is certainly wrong. So, in other words, what Prabhupada's saying is the Mayavadis are saying it's like this world's an illusion. It's not, it's not an illusion. It does exist. We may be in illusion about it. We may be in illusion that we're the body, but the body does exist. So the body's not an illusion. We can be illusioned by so many things, but it doesn't mean those things which we're illusioned by are actually illusions. It's our consciousness, which is giving us the concept that something is what it isn't. Pranava Om, or the Omkar in the Vedas, is the primeval hymn. This transcendental sound is identical with the form of the Lord. All the Vedic hymns are based on this Pranava Omkara. Tattvamasi, this is the statement of the Mayavadis, Tattvamasi, I am that, or you are that. In other words, you are the Supreme. You mean I'm the Supreme? Oh, that feels good. Good to know. That makes my day. Actually, if you think you're the Supreme, it will not make your day. It'll ruin your eternity. But it seems like it'll make your day, but it won't. It might make your day more illusory and therefore kind of numb the pain of having to be a conditioned jiva, but it won't make your eternity. But when we hear, I am eternal servant of Krishna, part and parcel, that makes our eternity. Not only makes our day, it makes our eternity. Jai Prabhu, what you just said totally made my eternity. Yeah. Like that. Tattvamasi is but a side word in the Vedic literatures, and therefore this word cannot be the primeval hymn of the Vedas. So this is what the Mayavadis say. Tattvamasi, you are that. That's the essence of the Vedas. But you are that means you are, for us, that means I'm servant of him. I'm part of him. But for them it means you are him. And so that's the essence of the Vedas. Sripad Shankar Acharya has given more stress on the side word Tattvamasi than on the primeval principle of Omkara. So Shankar Acharya, as most of you know, is actually Lord Shiva, who was ordered by the Lord to give people faith in the Vedas after Buddha, Lord Buddha, came and destroyed people's faith in the Vedas. He had his mission to destroy their faith because they were misusing the Vedas. So the idea was, you're misusing the Vedas, so better we just teach you that the Vedas are bogus. And then you're not going to misuse them because you're not going to use them at all. And then Lord Krishna told Lord Shiva, you need to come as a Mayavad, impersonalist, and take what Buddha taught, that philosophy, but establish it on the basis of the Vedas so we can bring people back in to having faith in the Vedas. So it was his thankless task to speak Mayavad philosophy. And so when we hear about Shankaracharya, one of the most interesting things about Shankaracharya was because he's Lord Shiva and because he's a devotee, at the end of his life, he had been teaching his disciples this Mayavad philosophy, but at the end of his life he said, actually, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda Mudha Mate. Mudha, as you may know, means ass, fool, rascal. He said, you fools and rascals, just worship Govinda. Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda. Bhaja Govinda Mudha Mate. You Mudha, you ass. He said, and Mayavadic philosophers are trying to use philosophy and study of grammar in Sanskrit and analyzing words and mixing words up in a way in order to distinguish what is truth from illusion. And so he said, just worship Govinda, and your juggling of prefixes and suffixes is not going to help you at the time of death. And they thought, oh no, Guru Maharaj has gone insane. Because Shankaracharya never revealed that before. Now he's revealing it on his deathbed. So maybe it's dementia. Who knows what it is? And so they didn't take that seriously. They thought he lost his mind. He's telling us we're God, and now he's telling us to worship Govinda. He's lost his mind. But it was kind of a slap in the face, I think. At least we can set the record straight that if someone believes in Mayavad philosophy, which originally came from Shankaracharya, we can say, do you know what he said, his last words? I think Jahnavi Harrison has sang that song, right? Prabhupada sometimes would chant that. And if you go on the internet, you'll see many people chant this song. So, anyone says, well, I follow Shankaracharya. I said, yeah, but what was the last thing Shankaracharya said? Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda. Interesting, isn't it? I think so. Okay, we're going to continue reading. Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Mudha. You fool, just worship Govinda. Prapte, I forget it now. Prapte sanite, dukhin karane nahi nahi rakshati, dukhin karane. Yeah, when I was young and my brain was working better, I had it memorized. But it means juggling of Sanskrit grammar is not going to save you at the time of death. Worshipping Govinda will save you. The Lord thus spoke on the Vedanta Sutra and defied all the propaganda of the Mayavadi school. This is Prabhupada speaking here. The Bhattacharya tried to defend himself with his Mayavad school by jugglery of logic and grammar, but the Lord was able to defeat him by his forceful arguments. He affirmed that we are all related with the personality of Godhead eternally, and that devotional service is our eternal function in exchanging the dealings of our relations. The result of such exchanges is to attain prema, or love of Godhead. When love of Godhead is attained, love for all other beings automatically follows, because the Lord is the sum total of all living beings. That's a beautiful idea, but the downside is when you don't have love of God, if you have love of God, you love everyone. If you don't have love of God, you don't love anyone. That's the problem. If you have love of Krishna, that means you don't envy Krishna. That means you have no envy for anybody. And if you, unfortunately, don't love Krishna, that means you envy Krishna, which means you envy others. So, there's this. Okay, now, Now it's time for controversy, because, all this philosophy, I think, has put a few of you to sleep. I have to wake you up now. So now it's time for controversy. There has been accusations. I don't know if you're aware of this. This might boil your blood. Definitely will wake you up. This will upset you a little bit, but I think it's important to clarify this. There have been accusations made against Srila Prabhupada when he said things about different classes of people, just basically making statements about the nature of certain people. And indirectly, the Bhagavatam does make these statements without stating people's natures. It just states that there's different classes of people which are considered outcast by Vedic standards, and it lists them in the Bhagavatam. Siberians are listed as an outcast. I mean, we're all outcast. Outcast means outside Vedic culture, so we're not singling out Siberians. Singling out all of us, basically. But it talks about Siberians, talks about Chinese. Americans didn't exist at that time. So Americans are all Europeans. So we were Europeans, most Americans, or now immigrants from all over the world have become Americans. So it talks about different classes of people being disqualified by Vedic standards, but they can become Krishna conscious by the mercy and power of the pure devotee. So sometimes Prabhupada would make observations that, Nadia, at least, I'm very depressed because Americans weren't mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but Siberians were mentioned, so I'm like envious of you. You got mentioned in the Bhagavatam, I didn't. I feel so insignificant. I don't know if I'm going to get over this. I'm envious of Nadia because her race of people is mentioned in the Bhagavatam, and the Chinese are mentioned, Kasha Desh, Kasha, the Mongolians, it's so many. Anyway, so sometimes we make observations of classes of people. This class of people is like this class of people is like that. And those observations were made by Prabhupada in discussions about social organization. This is just like we've had problems with political leaders who are not qualified become political leaders. What to speak of a doctor who's a quack. So this social organization is kind of a no-brainer. It's obvious that qualified people have a certain nature who are qualified for a certain occupation should be doing it. And without those qualifications, they shouldn't do it, and people who have other qualifications should be doing other things. And sometimes, Jyotir Maya is a Greek, and they're part of the Vedic culture. But Yavana, not really part of Vedic culture, but another form of outcast, Yavana. So you got to mention also. 2 points for the Greeks, they got mentioned. So sometimes Prabhupada, in discussing how society should be organized according to the Vedic idea of different classes, would say, well, these people are like this, therefore they should do this. It wasn't a criticism of those people, it was just an observation, and obviously, especially in Kali Yuga, you can't stereotype everyone of a certain race that they're like this. But certain races, certain people, tendency. Like, for example, in India, I guess all over the world this is true, but especially in India, you will find people's surnames often or always indicates their occupation, their varna. And so if you say the word Marwari, you go, business person, they're good in business, they're just known. So if I say Marwaris are good in business, no one will think that, well, that's not politically correct. How can you say Marwaris are good in business? No one's going to think that's offensive. And the fact is that most Marwaris are good in business. If I say Jewish people are good in business, people will say, yeah, they're good in business. It's not does that mean they're stupid and they can't be priests and Brahmins? No. Does that mean they can't be Kshatriyas? No, it just means generally they're good in business. So Prabhupada would make statements like that. And some of those statements, which were unfortunately, some of those statements were made in private discussions within a context of social organization, of how, if there were a Krishna conscious government, we might do things, which kind of radical ideas, like ideally, this is, in an ideal world, this is how it would be, just like Parikshit Maharaj faced off with Kali because Kali was killing a cow. So we could say, ideally, in a Krishna conscious government, if anyone kills a cow, they would be killed. Now, if we publicly said that, people would misunderstand. I think, how could you kill someone because they killed a cow? And so in private discussions, Prabhupada would say things of this nature, that, in the ideal situation, these people would be like this, and these people would be like this, and these people would be punished for that, and so on. And unfortunately, because the Veda base published everything that Prabhupada said, even in private conversations about things which were very theoretical, which may never happen, but it's just theoretically, in the perfect world, this is how it would be. And things that Prabhupada said that he never did. A lot of times he would say things because it was a theoretical discussion, but he never acted that way. These people should be punished. In a social context, if we were running a government, but in the preaching context, we go preach to those people and tell them to become devotees and move in the temple. Right? So when some people read those statements of Srila Prabhupada, they said he's racist, because now, as we know, there is extreme sensitivities in the world because of what's going on in America with so many African Americans being mistreated by police. Oh, mistreated, that's it. Killed, actually. Innocent people. I don't want to say they're innocent. They may have committed a crime, but the police killed them. And there were innocent people who were killed. Accidentally, purposely. We don't know, but many black people were killed. Unnecessarily, for sure, unnecessarily, unfairly. And so this has brought this issue to the forefront. And now that it's really on everyone's mind, it has been on everyone's mind since the 60s, but lately, there have been so many unfortunate incidents involving African Americans that it's on everyone's mind. And so it's not, and then because it's on everyone's mind, it also becomes on our mind, and we start looking at our philosophy and, seeing, kind of testing ourselves. Well, what's our position, and how are we treating African Americans or black devotees in ISKCON? And Prabhupada made some statements about Negroes or black people, which seem to be racist, which again, we're just discussing general natures of people, and what they're best suited to do. And of course, we know in the modern world, black people are doing everything. They're Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. They're doing everything. And white people are also Brahmins, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Shudras. But there's tendencies for certain classes traditionally to occupy certain positions, certain roles, certain jobs. And so it appeared that Prabhupada was racist. And so he has been accused of being racist by some people, some former devotees, some second-generation devotees who feel that they, of course, had no choice in becoming devotees. And when they read these things, became upset. So, Prabhupada says here, when you love Krishna, you love everyone. So, I think the irony of ironies would be to accuse Prabhupada of being racist, because he's probably one of the only few people that ever walked the planet, at least in a modern era, that you could say didn't have a racist bone in his body. Now, people say that. I don't have a racist bone in my body. But because we think we're the body, you can't really say that. And because we don't love Krishna, you can't say that you love everybody, although you may want to love everybody or feel like you love everybody. That may be your intention. You're not prejudiced, or you don't want to be prejudiced, or you treat people fairly. Yes, that's true, we can do that. But truly speaking, only someone who loves Krishna could say, I have no prejudice, and I don't have a prejudiced bone in my body, and that I actually love everybody. But who can say that they love everybody? I mean, you know how difficult it is to even love the people you're supposed to love, like your mother and father, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, your brother, it's hard, families have so many problems, and they're the ones we should love the most, and we have problems loving them. So we know how difficult it is to love, what to speak of people who mistreat you. So, this is an important point Prabhupada's making. When you love Krishna, you love everybody. When you don't love Krishna, you may love somebody, but your love will have some limitation. And definitely you can't love everybody. And that's why, one of the reasons that when people say, why are you a vegetarian? And you say, because when a devotee loves God, he loves all creatures. And you cannot kill someone that you love. That's impossible. So we can say devotees do have love in that sense. They won't kill an ant. And devotees have love in the sense that they will try to give Krishna to everyone. So they're representing Krishna's love, even though their love for Krishna is not perfect yet, but they're representing Krishna's love. And you can say, now the question comes up, well, as devotees, can we say we have no prejudice? We can say, well, if you were a pure devotee, you would have no prejudice. Or it wouldn't manifest, whatever prejudices you were conditioned to have would no longer manifest. Because what would manifest is only love and compassion. That's all. And patience, tolerance, like that. So, can you say a devotee has no prejudice? What we say is a devotee is a work in progress. So we say more that we're practicing to be devotees. We're on the path of being devotees. So we have a lot of things within us, as we all know, that are not perfect yet, even though we're devotees. But certainly, we should be better off than we were before we were devotees. But, and this is a big but, I don't think any devotee should think that I don't have any prejudice. I don't have, because I'm a devotee, I don't have prejudice. Or because I'm a devotee, I'm not envious of anyone. Or because I'm a devotee, I have compassion for everyone. That is true only, or absolutely, on the theoretical level. But on the practical level, that is a question that only you can answer. If I'm envious or prejudiced. Now, I think we all know the answer. Well, I'm not pure, so obviously some prejudice or envy or something has entered our heart. When we first went to India in 1975, most devotees found it very difficult dealing with Indian people. They were so different from us, and we're used to dealing with something in a certain way, but in India, especially in those days, sometimes it was very bureaucratic and complicated to do simple things, and frustrating. And also funny for us, because when we say no, this is yes and this is no. But for an Indian, this is yes. Sort of like, can I go in this way? Why can't I go in this way? No, go in this way. So it looks like he's saying no to us. So these like little things, stupid little things, Why everything you cook, it's so hot? I don't like it. And the Indians are saying, it's not hot, it's perfect. So it's just, cultural differences, and the Indians probably didn't like us because we're so aggressive and intolerant. And so, naturally, we didn't like certain things about India that we liked about America, and the Indians didn't like. certain things about America that they liked about India, you know. So we can't say as devotees we didn't have prejudice, you know. I think the Guru Kulis that grew up in India, they love to make fun of Indians. You know, it's funny to them, you know. Is it prejudice? Probably not, but, you know, can't say that it isn't entirely. You know, the little mannerisms that we find funny, which are just normal in India, they make fun of. So, you know, that's human conditioned nature. But here's my point. And this point relates to so much of our conditioning. When you're becoming a devotee, you will sometimes be surprised to find your conditioning, especially if you've been a devotee a long time. It's like, after all these years, I still feel this way about this class of people. I still don't like this class of people. That's crazy. Or I'm, you know, or whatever conditioning you have that you think should have gone away. And so the point is that as you progress in Krishna consciousness, your conditioning may not go away, but your ability to dissolve that conditioning in the sense of it not having any grip on you, so you don't act it out. So maybe I do have some prejudice for a certain kind of class of people, but I don't act on it. When I go out to preach, when I go out to distribute books, when I go out to meet people, I don't avoid those people. Even though I've been conditioned to think those people, there's something wrong with them, or they're inferior to me, or whatever crazy prejudice has been programmed into my brain. But I tolerate it. I understand that it was put in there, but I don't allow myself to act on it, because now I'm a devotee. That's the idea. So I think I was explaining to you, or explaining to someone, that I was raised in a neighborhood where everyone was white as far as the eye could see. Well, it was not as far as the eye could see. It was about 3 miles. The black neighborhood was 3 to 4 miles because we had apartheid. It wasn't legalized apartheid. It was economic apartheid. Black people didn't have economic opportunities, so they couldn't live in our neighborhood, and they wouldn't want to live in our neighborhood because we're all white, and they know white people don't like black people, so why would they want to live there? So our neighborhood was all white and all Jewish. And as I said, the black neighborhood was about 3 or 4 miles east of us. But everything west of us and north of us and south of us for quite a ways, maybe not so far south, was white. So, you know, that's what I grew up with. Not that I didn't like, I had anything against black people. I just didn't interact with them. So I think, you know, I had like one black friend I had. There was hardly any black people in our high school because they didn't live near us. And so I just didn't have any interaction with them. And we had a woman who would come and clean our house every week. Once a week she'd come and clean the whole house. And she was black. And we had a gardener who would come once a week and do our gardening. And he was Mexican. So, you know, this is just innocence. So what is going into my little impressionable mind? That, well, the black people, you know, you're a little kid and you see the black person's cleaning your house and the Mexican person's doing your lawn. Okay, well, we're the privileged white class. I didn't have those words, but it's just like, it's subconscious. And you're not interacting with any of them. And then when I was like 16, there were huge riots in a place called Watts. It was in East Los Angeles, and there was a big protest by the black community. And I'm just 16. I wasn't following the politics. Like, what's going on? Why are they doing that? That doesn't happen in white neighborhoods. And so what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of innocent prejudice and programming that you grow up with. What if you grow up in the South of the United States? There's tremendous prejudice towards black people. Very conservative. And there's tremendous prejudice towards anyone who is not white and straight, basically. So, and you may say, I'm not prejudiced, but all I'm trying to say is, if you're honest, you'll realize so much prejudice was programmed into you, either through your eyes or through your ears or through your experience. So our position as devotees is that we recognize it and we just don't act on it. And if you're honest, you'll, when we were kids, the only thing we ever talked about in relation to Chinese was Chinese torture. And I had no idea what Chinese torture was. But they'd have little things where you put your finger in it. It was like this piece made from some kind of straw, and you put your finger in it, and you couldn't get them out. And they go, and then my friends would say, "This is Chinese torture. You can't move your hands up." And I'm like, Chinese torture. So I got programmed with this idea, Chinese torture. When we were children, we used to have drills. Alarms would go off, and we would have to fall down in pale obeisances, not pale obeisances, but like pale obeisances, under our tables. And the teacher said, if this ever happened in real life, it means that the Russians would be dropping bombs on America. Okay, Russians. Now, I don't like you guys because we think you want to kill us. Germans killed the Jews, Nazis. How do you Jewish people feel about Germans? Maybe you have some issues. So that's my point. Now, if you are raised in an ultra-conservative environment, you're going to have issues with homosexuals, transgender, etc., because you were told there's something wrong with that. So it's just, a question of realizing these things. And going back to my original point, understanding that someone on Prabhupada's level cannot be racist. It's a contradiction. It's impossible. Because he loves Krishna, he loves everyone, he sees everyone as spirit soul. And to accuse him of racism is the ultimate paradox. Because racism, it's built into the bodily conception. I think I'm of a certain body and I don't like other bodies. That's where it comes from. So just had to say that to wake you up. But I had to say this also because I have been studying this and discussing this, and this is a big issue now amongst leadership in our movement of helping devotees understand the statements of Prabhupada that don't seem politically correct. And the last thing I want to say, maybe underscore it because I already said it, was that some devotees may say, well, did Prabhupada say these things when you were present? And of course, in his books, he talks about women in what seems to be a derogatory way in some cases. And said, didn't it bother you? And the general answer you'll get will say, well, we were dealing with Prabhupada. So what we saw with him as a person and how he acted didn't at all coincide with what we might think was meant by those statements, because what he meant by those statements was not really what we thought he meant. And so we just those statements didn't bother us because he didn't act that way. It wasn't how he dealt with them. He didn't deal with women like, oh, you're just stupid, just go in the back and make flower garlands and just, don't say anything. He didn't deal with the women like that. Go out there, distribute books, He even told them, go start your own temples. And, they had women's traveling parties, run by women and so many things. So he wasn't holding them back. He wasn't making them feel inferior. So black devotees didn't feel that Prabhupada thought there was, they were inferior. So that's why sometimes devotees wonder, well, Prabhupada said this, weren't you upset by it? It didn't really have any effect on us because it wasn't what we were seeing, Does that make sense? It wasn't what we were seeing and how Prabhupada acted. So, we kind of had to contextualize it within a specific, conversation, a philosophical conversation of social organization, generally this class of people, generally women, children, stay home, don't work, churn butter, like that. But that's just it's a generalization. It's not for every woman and every person, Black people are strong, they should be laborers. Yeah, maybe, some, they can lift heavy things. Of course, nowadays you don't have to be strong. The machines lift everything. So, and those same strong Black people can be professors and CEOs, or, they can be anything, so. Some of these conversations are, I feel like they apply more, they fit well in different environments, when it seems from what Prabhupada taught us that previously people were more well classified by their birth, by their nature. They fit into broader categories. And, now it's Kali Yuga, they don't fit so well. I mean, in some ways they fit. Women fit a certain way, men in a certain way, certain races in certain ways tend to be good at certain things than others. But broadly fitting? No, you don't. Black people are good athletes. You know that. And Black people are good musicians. You know that. Every Black person a good athlete? No. Every Black person a good musician? No. Are there good white athletes? Yes. Are there good white musicians? Yes. So, right? Okay, I'm going to go back. We have some comments. See, I woke you up. Got some comments. It worked. Kelly says, this was actually a point of difficulty for me early on. I know I love Krishna, but coming to Prabhupada was something I resisted because of some of the things he said. Understood. In the end, I decided to stop trying to read modern sentiments into things that Prabhupada said decades ago, and instead focus on what he did in his position as Acharya. Prabhupada initiated people of every gender, nationality, skin color, orientation, etc., and always said that Krishna was for everyone. So, another thing, Kaylee and all of you, should understand, this is, as I said, this has been discussed, is being discussed also by leaders. It's an issue. And in the discussions that I had, and I think we had talked about this before, many devotees made the point is if you read a statement without having read all of Prabhupada's statements on that topic, that's when you get into problems, right? So you read one statement and you think, well, why did he say that? But 10 other statements are different. So then you say, okay, this must be within a particular context, in a particular application, or relating to a particular time, like you're saying in history, or a future date when the whole world becomes Krishna conscious and we can say, okay, we're going to organize Varnashram and you're going to all get your aptitude test. And then we're going to see maybe certain classes of people. South Indians, maybe they're good as engineers, computer programmers. North Indians are better at this. These Indians are better at business. These Indians are better at farming. I think we would see that to some degree. But, so that was the context that Prabhupada was speaking in. So when you read everything Prabhupada said on the particular topic, and then you learn about how he dealt with those people, then it puts things in perspective. So I think that's important. And now we have another controversial topic, which we could have a whole series on. And does the spiritual master ever say something that's wrong? Okay, you could say, yeah, my guru sometimes said something that, materially he got some misinformation or something or whatever. Or he's not good in science and he misunderstood something. Okay, that's understandable. Does Prabhupada ever say anything that's wrong? Ooh. And why would he? And what if he did? And how do we deal with it? And it's a very, very sensitive topic. And I can only give a general answer that Prabhupada once was asked, sometimes it seems like you don't know something or you misquote a verse. Prabhupada said, I'm not God, I'm not omniscient. But the qualification of the spiritual master is he can make you a devotee. He can get you out of the material world. So that's pretty good, right? He may not be accurate about everything materially. He may have been given misinformation. The whole world may have been given misinformation about something that none of us could know unless we were scientists with 3 PhDs and were willing to, do the research. So we get information, and then 10 years later we find that information was actually wrong. And 10 years ago, my guru said this, because that was the predominating idea, and he had no other way to investigate it, and it made sense to him. And now we know that's false. So that's how sometimes he could say something materially. That's not correct. I was reading Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he made this distinction. He said even when the sages or scriptures talk about something which could be studied materially, it could be elaborated on and proven differently in the future, even though it comes from a sage. That's interesting, right? So, what if your spiritual master says something and you know it's wrong? And he says, there are no women that have ever done this. And you're thinking, wait a minute. If you know anything about history, there's so many women have done that. So how do you deal with that? And say, well, I guess he doesn't know that. But that's not a make it or break it back to Godhead. If he doesn't know this, it doesn't mean if he got that wrong, doesn't mean you can't go back to Godhead. It just means it's material information which is, unknown to him. Or as I said, sometimes unknown to everybody until a future time in history when people know it. And so we had this problem when Prabhupada was saying that women's brains are not found to be larger than 32 ounces, and men's brains go up to 64. And that the larger the brain, the smarter you are. But then Prabhupada heard that when he was a student, so that means, in the early 1900s. But then if you read, you'll find, as far as I know, as far as I read, as far as I remember, the brain of Marilyn Monroe, the famous actress, model, was about 57 ounces. And Albert Einstein's brain was like in the 30s something. You can double check that. But there's not, as far as maybe someone has more current information, but that exact information that Prabhupada got has not stood up against the test of time. That some women have larger brains than men. A lot of it depends on the fact that generally women are smaller, so their brains are smaller. Does the size of the brain have to do with the level of intelligence? If Albert Einstein's brain was smaller than Marilyn Monroe, not that many people are as smart as him. And then, as I had mentioned, the most intelligent, the person who has the highest IQ to date, which is 205, is a woman. And I don't know if she's a large woman. So, this is, whoops, excuse me. This was always an interesting topic for me. Give me a second. I have to make a little noise here. Put this back on. This was always an interesting topic for me, and I think interesting for many of us, because it's not something we learned, and so when we would discuss this with devotees, there, were a few devotees who would say, well, Prabhupada's a pure devotee, whatever he says is true, even if it's not true. Even if Marilyn Monroe did have a 57-ounce brain and Albert Einstein had a 32-ounce brain, or 34, I think it was 34. So still, whatever the pure devotee says is true. So that's one way of presenting it. It's just he knows everything is true. Which most devotees said, no, that's not actually the way Prabhupada presented himself. And so generally, if you ask devotees about this 32-64-ounce thing, there may be some new research in terms of size of brain and intelligence, or it may be size of a certain part of the brain. There's always new research, but when you ask devotees about this, devotees generally will say, they'll say two things. They'll say, it was a joke, he wasn't serious, which most devotees won't say that he was joking, but there was some joking around it, but I don't think that particular point he was joking about. But generally what you'll find is that, well, this is what he learned in school, which was later disproven. If you've taken a science class, theories constantly change. And you learn all the old theories and the new theories. It's part of your, when I took physics, he took us through the theories and what was accepted at this time in history, how it was proven false, what was added to that or corrected it, or the new ideas that came. And you're sitting in the class and you're thinking, okay, we're learning theories now that maybe prove false in the future, which interesting kind of education. But anyway, in fact, our teacher told us that. He said, well, what you're learning today may not be true. We'll find out. I was like, great. Spending my time learning something that's not even true. And I'm having to pay money for it. Oh, this is kind of weird. Well, my parents were paying the money. But I thought it was weird to pay money to learn something that probably isn't true. And he's getting paid to teach something that's probably not true entirely. So that's how we took it. That's how we made peace with what Prabhupada said. Okay, that's just what he learned. Now, when sometimes Prabhupada would quote people that he actually didn't respect necessarily, but who said things which were supportive of Krishna consciousness, so he would quote them. And my personal understanding was that if there was an authority, even if we disagree with that authority, or we felt their authority was not reliable, but they stated something which supported a principle or practice of Krishna consciousness, sometimes Prabhupada would quote them because people had faith in them. And so because they had faith in them, he could quote them and say, so-and-so says this. Like sometimes we might quote someone who's done research into reincarnation and say, well, this is what he's found. Do we really trust him entirely or not? It doesn't really matter if people in general trust that particular science. Of course, a lot of them don't. But at least there's some respect for academics and psychologists among some people. So if there's respect for that discipline of psychology that could investigate factually the reports that are given under hypnosis by people who say they were such and such a person, and they describe that person and they describe that place and it's documented, and then you can go there and document and against what they said, and you find that what they said all proved to be true, at least is something that many people would accept. So then Prabhupada would just quote that person. He says this. It doesn't mean that he necessarily believes in everything that person says. So, Prabhupada was quoting the 6432 thinking that that was accepted. And although it wasn't, you know. So people found it kind of amusing that he would think like that. They think, oh. And then, you know, one reporter said, oh, I understand that's what you learned in school. And she kind of laughed. I said, oh, that's funny. Because we never learned that. So, and for Prabhupada, it didn't matter if it were true or not. It wasn't his concern. He just thought, if people believe in it, then we'll quote it. So did Prabhupada really believe women had 64 ounces? If we told Prabhupada, actually, they don't, that was what you learned in school, you'd think he'd fight it? I don't think so. It wouldn't make any sense. So, sometimes we have to adjust to, you know, now some people take offense and say, oh, you say that Prabhupada, it was just his culture, and that's why he is, you know, preaching this and preaching that, that's because it was the culture in India at that time. And some devotees take great offense to that because they say, no, Prabhupada's not preaching the culture he grew up in. He's preaching eternal Dharma, which is true, but it's not without, you know, realistically speaking, you can't say he wasn't affected by the culture he grew up and the values he grew up with. But as we saw, he was willing to adjust to the West. So I don't think it's wrong to say that, well, he's looking through a certain lens. Like, for example, homosexuality. I don't know what the figures are, there's a certain percentage of the population is homosexual. Probably bigger, I think the figures are bigger than I ever thought they were. But as we know, homosexuality was kind of considered a disease. Like something's wrong with you and you need to be cured. And it's really looked down upon as an abomination, non-Christian, you know, like you're of the devil, sinful, etc. So all the people who are homosexual didn't want to come out of the closet because they'd be scorned by society. And then things started changing, and they realized, well, people are just born that way. Wasn't a choice. And in some cases, it may have been a choice, but in most cases, it's just how they were. They were never attracted to the opposite sex. You put the opposite sex in front of them, and it's like, nah, not for me. I'm not attracted. And then put the same sex, and you go, yes, I'm attracted. Something's wrong with you. You know, we have to, you know, put you on a stretcher, or you know, give you medicine or whatever. So, and interestingly enough, this is one of the most interesting paradoxes of Kali Yuga. The most religious people can be the least compassionate and the most prejudiced. And especially you see that in very traditionally religious people. Homosexuality has no place for them. Like, you know, homosexuals should just be like disregarded and you're put in a garbage truck or something and just like, get rid of you guys. You know, this is a disease. So in Prabhupada's India, the homosexuals were in the closet, right? You know, it's just like homosexuality in India. It was like homosexuality in Arkansas, you know, in 1950. It's like, kill them, get rid of them, they're not Christian, you know. So, but Prabhupada didn't have that heart. He gave sannyas to devotees he knew were homosexuals, but they were following Krishna consciousness. He had no problem with it. But if you want to put down homosexuality, you could find things that Prabhupada said. Now, to support that. Now, is it scriptural? Is it cultural? Is that how he dealt with homosexuals? Did he really mean the things he said? It's a whole discussion. But personally, I think to say that any of us, even pure devotees, are not affected by the culture we grew up in, that's pretty much impossible. It's like saying there's no conditioning that's affecting anybody. Well, and even if you say Prabhupada was not affected by conditioning because he's a pure devotee, at least we know he didn't act on any of what he should have been conditioned by. He didn't act on it, that's for sure. So you could say in that sense he's not conditioned. But certainly we are conditioned, that's for sure. And we should, look at our conditioning. So this is a very sensitive issue, but it needs to be discussed because it's real and you will think about it. And just like some of you are my disciples, what if I tell you something and you know it's wrong? And a lot of you already do this. You'll write me and you'll say, Guru Maharaj, you said this, but that's not correct. It's actually like this. And I'll say, oh, I didn't know. I won't say, how dare you tell me I'm wrong? I'm your guru. Everything I do is right. That's not, it's not the relationship. If I'm, doing something, I said this, but if we do that, it's going to create a problem. So you tell me that you told us to do that, but that's not right. We'll all end up in jail if we do that. I go, oh, I didn't know. In your country, that's illegal. In our country, it's legal. Well, thanks for letting me know it's illegal because I was telling all the devotees in that country to do that and they'd all end up in jail. Something like that. Okay, not that bad, but that could happen. So, yeah. The other thing about Srila Prabhupada is he was so practical, you could come to him and explain anything, and if it wasn't going to work to spread Krishna consciousness, it's like, okay, we can't do that. There was something Prabhupada wrote in his books, and it's interesting because I'm not a historian or a sociologist, but I don't think it takes much of a brain to figure this out. That in certain times in history, you could talk about things and nobody would blink an eye. It's just like, who cares? It's like, you talk about these people's rights or that people's rights or these people are like this or these, and nobody cares. Maybe it's their defect that they didn't care. Whatever the case is, they didn't care. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't, all the political correctness that we have today didn't exist at other times. So you'd say things and nobody would bat an eye. They go, yeah, whatever. Yeah, of course, it's like that. The environment today is very sensitive to political correctness, as you noticed. And in some ways, it's a sign of progress. In some ways, it might be kind of over the top a bit, to a point where it's not even realistic, where it's hard to talk about things as they are without offending somebody. So, my sense is that Prabhupada would say things that within his culture, in that context, would just be like, yeah, no big deal. So there were some things he wrote in his book, and the editor went to Prabhupada and said, we can't say this because this will cause problems in this way if we say this. And it was not an essential aspect of our philosophy, like we can't say that you can't say you're God. No, we have to say you're not God. Something else, just a side thing, a side issue about certain people being a certain way or something of that nature. And Prabhupada said, then take it out. And then there was another conversation along these same lines, and they said, Prabhupada, there's some things in your books that in some place and in some time in the future could be troublesome. It could be misunderstood by people, even by governments, who would see us as anti-patriotic or in some way racist. Can we remove those things from your books in the future? Or those statements, wherever they are, lectures or wherever. Can we remove them? I forget the context. I thought it was the books. Can we remove them? And Prabhupada said, if they're troublesome and they would cause problems, they should be removed. So Prabhupada was very practical. And it was amazing, it's like he could say something about a person. At the same time, He had no envy and only compassion and love for the person. And for us, generally, if we say something negative about a person, it's because we have negative feelings towards them. Where Prabhupada could just say, you're not good at this. And we think, oh, you don't like me, or, that's unkind. No, I love you. It's just, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Something like that. Or this is not your nature. So, these are sensitive issues, but they're important to understand. Okay, definitely I've kept you awake. Or maybe some of you couldn't take it and left the class. I don't know. A little of both. Satyarupa says, Prabhupada was only categorizing as per Shastra like we categorize Brahman. Yeah. Basically, categorizing by Shastra and, based on how he was seeing. But, Varnashram it's a tricky topic. We talk about establishing Varnashram, but it kind of flies in the face of modern society if we don't establish it correctly, because it looks like a very unpolitically correct system to categorize people. So it has to be done sensitively, with compassion. Rashi says, in the ISKCON matrimony India, we see this almost 90% specific caste they want to marry. Yeah. So the caste thing is deeply ingrained everywhere in the world. I was at my mother's in-laws' house, and she had a book called Caste, and it was a book about caste in America. It was written by a black woman, and she said there are two castes in America: the black caste and the white caste. And she had been to India and said it resembles exactly the caste system of India. It's just not talked about it. And she said caste is entirely different from race. It's actually nothing to do with race. It's how we define people according to their body. So what is so interesting about Krishna consciousness is, and you see this in your own life, and you can see this in the life of other devotees, is that how much more effect our conditioning has on us than the Krishna consciousness has on us. Because if Krishna consciousness has effect on us, then that caste thing should not be of so much concern, but it's still concern. And I've talked to Indian devotees, and they said, yeah, we're very affected by this because it's been ingrained within us from early age. Now, marrying in your own caste is not in and itself a big crime, because there may be similarities which are helpful for your marriage. But if you're very congenial with another person outside your caste, your family may not like it because it's interracial marriage and they're not comfortable with that. But and that's where the Krishna consciousness comes in. I told this funny story once, but I think many of you haven't heard it. There was an elderly Indian woman who is a disciple of Radhanath Swami, and they were discussing who I think her granddaughter was going to marry. And she said, definitely he should not marry a non-Indian, a Westerner, or she said shouldn't marry an American. That would be like really bad. And they said, Grandma, where's your Guru Maharaj from? It was Radhanath Swami. And then she just kind of woke up. Yeah. So, we have conditioning affecting us. It's coming in through osmosis. Then we have Krishna consciousness. And the challenge is that a lot of that Krishna consciousness doesn't go in as deeply as our cultural conditioning or other forms of conditioning. As you advance in Krishna consciousness, you become more affected by Krishna consciousness. So that's something for you to just look, and say, how much am I affected by Krishna consciousness? How much am I affected by my culture? Like we were talking about prejudice. People you like, you don't like. People you respect, you don't respect. How much of that is associated with your upbringing? Like if you're raised in America, you basically think you're better than everybody. That's just kind of like, it's just it's just a fact in our mind, But if you're a more evolved person, you'll think, well, that's ridiculous. That's just American ego. It's not true. There's nothing to prove it. And all the Americans, they know what I'm talking about. There's nothing to prove that we're better, It's just the country has been more successful, but, spiritually are we better? No. Morally are we better? No. In so many ways we're not better. But we're better in enough ways that we'd be able to win the game economically and militaristically, so we're the best. Yeah, and how long is that going to last? So, but it's conditioned there, or people from New York would naturally think they're like better than people from certain other states in America. Because I've spoken to people like that who moved from the south of America to the west coast or east coast, and everybody treated her like she was kind of stupid, because that was the idea. Well, people from this state are all stupid. I didn't even know they spoke English in that state. Kind of a joke. Oh, you guys speak English there? Do you wear shoes also? Is that, So, yeah. So you want to recognize these things in yourself, right? Because they exist in yourself, in myself, and all of us. So yes, Rashi, you have the problem with caste. The caste problem is it's just stated, it's clear. In America, it's kind of not so clear, but it's still there. It just doesn't come. We don't have the names for the caste and the families, and we've never had a caste system written out on paper that this is how it is, but we have it all. When I came back from South Africa in 1983, I was in a state of shock, because I lived in South Africa during apartheid, and when I came back to America, I saw that there was apartheid in America. It was economic apartheid. It was opportunity apartheid. There was no law that a black person couldn't live in a white neighborhood. It's just they didn't, because at that time, the white people didn't want them there. So it was like psychologically there was apartheid. And the economic opportunities were such that they couldn't afford, most black people couldn't afford to live in nicer white neighborhoods. So they weren't wanted, and they didn't have the money. Not that some black people had the money, but then, why do you want to live in a neighborhood where nobody wants you and everybody would wish you're not there? So, and how we're seeing black people are treated by the police and so on. And so I was like, oh my God, there's apartheid in America. It's not a law. It was supposed to have been abolished. What happened after slavery was abolished? So many laws restricting black people. So we had apartheid in America. We abolished slavery, so they were no longer slaves, but still so many restrictions. Interesting, right? So, don't think India is the only place where the caste system exists. We've got it here. It's alive and well. Wow, look at that. I'm on my phone. Prabhupada said women should be protected. That's true. We have japa with this new schedule, we have japa in 9 minutes. So I have to finish. And I have to say something inspirational, which is going to be quite spontaneous now, that we're doing class later. We have a question. I met in a comment on Facebook by one devotee that most devotees do not fully love Krishna because they approach him through fear of material energy, reactions, and more. Approach him through fear of material energy, reactions, and therefore cannot have the strength to love Krishna fully. I think he's referring to people in the beginning coming to Krishna consciousness. Well, you can analyze that for yourself. Are you coming to Krishna more to become free from misery, or are you coming to love him? I think the answer is in the beginning is mostly to get free from misery. The other reason, to love him for knowledge, to have material benefit, they're all there. For each individual, one is stronger than the other. And you might say, no, I didn't come for any of those reasons. I came to get prasadam. Vidananda said he came to understand the truth, not to get a new religion, not for this or that. So that's his nature. So, but you say fear of suffering. Yeah, I'm suffering because I don't have knowledge. So that's true. But then as we progress in devotional service, we understand that motive is not the right motive. It's not the purest motive. And then we progress and develop from that. Cultural language differences is also a factor. Things said in other languages do not always mean the same as what they mean in, definitely important point. And this is a whole issue about publishing Prabhupada's books in the future when words do not mean what they mean now, and we would have to adapt to that. I think I told you last week that the word awful actually means awesome. So if I said, now I'm reading Krishna Kanta Gopalini Devi Dasi's comment, and I said, if I said Krishna Kanta, that is an awful comment. The actual meaning is that's an awesome comment. But she thinks, oh, he just offended me by telling me that's an awful comment. And then she's depressed, and she doesn't want to do anything, she wants to leave Krishna consciousness. And finally someone says, well, why don't you write him and ask him? I said, no, I meant that was a beautiful comment. Just one word misunderstood. I use the Old English meaning, not the modern meaning. So she says, I read something in the Bhagavatam the other day, and I thought it was very confusing. It was saying that prostitutes also have their role in society. Does that mean that we have to have prostitutes in the society? Not in ISKCON. But if you're organizing, okay, this is a whole other discussion. This is where it gets really interesting, Krishna Kanta, and for all of you, it gets really interesting. If you read Prabhupada's books, there is this level of discussion which is about how society should be organized. And of course, there's also the level of discussion about how we should do sadhana bhakti. And there are two different discussions. So, should we have prostitutes in ISKCON? I think that's easy question to answer. No, because we have four regulative principles. Does society in general need prostitutes? Yes, because it, as Prabhupada said, it protects virgin girls. And where there is easily accessible prostitutes, the number of rapes decreases. Did you know that? So the general, I can't say specifically when we run the world. I mean, if we ran the world, if we would do this. But according to what Prabhupada's saying, it sounds like we should do it. And Prabhupada even said, and this is even harder to understand, that within Vedic culture, it seems that due to your caste, you kind of end up in a certain occupation and you're kind of bound to that. And some people were born as devotees or became devotees, but they were in a caste of prostitutes. I would also imagine that prostitution in that sense was a little different, more like an escort kind of thing. Not some dirty, grungy, little messy thing that goes on. So that's what I have to say about that. So, that's an interesting discussion, isn't it? Like when Prabhupada's talking about social organization, it seems at odds with how we would organize ISKCON, because they're two different things. And Prabhupada's concerned about so many. You have to protect women, you have to protect cows, stop abortion, this and that. But if a devotee wrote Prabhupada and said, I want to do a campaign to stop abortion, he would say, no, just distribute my books. So when you put on the Kshatriya hat, you see things differently. When you put on the Brahmin hat, you see things differently. So ISKCON right now at this stage is more of a Brahminical movement. So we don't have the Kshatriya hat on. When you put the Kshatriya hat on, all of a sudden you're concerned about so many other things. And you would even say things philosophically from a Kshatriya perspective that from a Brahmin perspective may not be true. Like we say, well, from the Brahmin perspective, it's like, oh, we're suffering COVID, it's just everyone's karma. From the Kshatriya perspective, it's like, no, it's because of bad leadership. Leaders should be punished. And now we're suffering karma. It's not my karma, it's the karma of the bad leader. Or it's the karma of the people who are killing animals and having abortions, and now the whole society is suffering. So that's how Kshatriya thinks. You know, the welfare of the people. People should be happy. They shouldn't suffer. And we say, but aren't they suffering because of their karma? We'll say, no, they're suffering because of bad leadership. That's the Kshatriya version. So you get this like interesting conversation going. Okay, now we have Tanya's intelligent answer, because she's a very intelligent woman. The current theory is that intellect is based on the volume of gray matter. I've heard that in certain brain regions. There are also some other theories, and there will be more theories in the future. My theory is the smartest person is the smartest person. That's my theory. When people say, you think women are more or less intelligent than men, I just go, what man are you talking about? What woman are you talking about? That's my theory. And what do you even mean by intelligence in the first place? I have sensation that some things are written in the Bhagavatam before Prabhupada actually came to the West, once he realized that some things he saw the way out of culture, but dealing Western men and women made him, yeah, it's true, he did see things differently. Brain power is determined by neural density, not size. Women's brains may have slightly less mass than men's, have more tightly packed neurons. This makes men and women around the same. I think women do better in school. And this can one of you save these comments so we can begin on Wednesday with these comments? Because now we're going to start the japa. This is also really good for me to have class here, because I can't go overtime, and I don't have enough time to go overtime anyway. So now I'm starting the japa class. Well, I'm going to attempt to start it in a minute, and you can all go on the japa class if you want. And we're going to have to end, but somebody, maybe Tanya, you could save those comments, and then we'll start tomorrow, or Wednesday, with those comments. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.